Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Way Wednesdays virtual Midrash. What is a Midrash, you ask? It is a virtual interactive study that we are doing here at thewaycongregation.com. Hey, Gary, it's great to see you.
Likewise.
Yeah. Hey, we started this back during the pandemic, and I'm glad that we've been able to do this. This has been a great time to go through the Torah portion and to take a deeper dive, and so it's really been a great time. This has been good.
Yeah. So one of those products of COVID, right?
Pretty much. Yeah. So in case people don't know, we just came off doing a Proclaim the Way webinar. So you guys can check out all the information right here at commonwealthofisrael.com, or just stay on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Doug Hamp. And you will find a playlist that has those episodes for you. So check that out. It really was a wonderful time as we went through all that incredible information. We did our best to keep it at a 101 level, but
there was a lot of stuff there.
Yeah,
I tell you, if you guys want some meat, chew on this for a while. Put on your seatbelt, because there's a lot of information.
Yeah. Yep. So and of course we have Sukkot with the Way that's coming up September 20th through the 29th, I think it is. People have actually been asking me for information about that, and we're also we are updating our website, so it's kind of a two things at once here, but we're trying to get that rolled out. But what's the approximate cost, Gary? You had a general figure in your head.
So if somebody is planning on staying the entire week, or actually I think it's like 9 days, camping out, whether you're in a tent or whether you're in an RV, you should budget probably around $400 to $600, depending on if you're going to be in a tent or an RV. An RV space would be on the higher end of $600, maybe a little bit more than that. A tent space and registration fees and all that stuff would probably be closer to $400. Then on top of that, you should budget for food, other things that you'll want to, consume while you're there. But in terms of all the activities and things that you could participate in and all of that kind of stuff is all included. And all the fun that you can, all the fun you can handle.
Very cool. We also just want to give a shout out to everyone who is online joining us right now. So glad to see you guys out there. I propose we get into the text. I'm itching to get into this one.
Before we get started, though, I think I think what's really important is that we're coming up on the Rosh Chodesh for Tammuz. So I think it's tomorrow night, perhaps Friday night. I have to check my calendar. And of course, Tammuz starts this the summer cycle of mourning, of tragedies that happens. The 17th of Tammuz is a fast day. There's 4 fast days that are actually associated with the destruction of the temple. When Babylon put a siege on Jerusalem, when the house of Judah was taken into exile. Of course, the 9th of Av is when the destruction of the temple occurred. That's next month. But as we enter into the month of Tammuz, it's kind of thinking about our mindset shifts and begins to think about this impending doom that is happening. And I can't imagine being an Israelite back in that day, when it's like, Lord, this is your holy city, this is your temple. How could you let this happen, when it's in fact it's the people that fell short that caused it to happen? And that's just tragic. And we see a little bit of that tonight in the Torah portion. That's why I wanted to mention it as we get into the rebellion of Korah and Dathan and Abiram. So and that's worth mentioning, because it puts our minds in a place where we should be seeking to repentance for one, but seeking to find out what is the root, what's the core of our rebellion, So with that, let's jump in.
Sounds good. Let's do it. Thank you for that recap. I appreciate that. All right. Now, Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, with Datan and Aviram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Pelet, sons of Reuben, took men, and they rose up before Moses with some of the children of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, representatives of the congregation, men of renown. They gathered together against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You take too much upon yourselves, for all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" So when Moses heard it, he fell on his face, and he spoke to Korah and all his company, saying, "Tomorrow morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near to him. That one whom he chooses, he will cause to come near to him. Do this: take censers, Korah, and all your company, put fire in them and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow. And it shall be that the man whom the Lord chooses is the Holy One. You take too much upon yourselves, you sons of Levi." Then Moses said to Korah, "Hear now, you sons of Levi, is it a small thing to you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel, to bring you near to himself, and to do the work of the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the congregation to serve them? And that he has brought you near to himself, you and all your brethren, the sons of Levi with you. And are you seeking the priesthood also? Therefore you and all your company are gathered together against the Lord. And what is Aaron that you complain against him?" And Moses sent to call Datan and Aviram, the sons of Eliab, but they said, "We will not come up. Is it a small thing that you've brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey, to kill us in the wilderness, that you should keep acting like a prince over us? Moreover, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? We will not come up." Then Moses was very angry and said to the Lord, "Do not respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey for them, nor have I hurt one of them." And Moses said to Korah, "Tomorrow you and all your company be present before the Lord, you and they, as well as Aaron. Let each take his censer and put incense in it, and each of you bring his censer before the Lord, 250 censers, both you and Aaron, each with his censer." So every man took his censer, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and stood at the door of the tabernacle of meeting with Moses and Aaron. And Korah gathered all the congregation against them at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to all the congregation, and the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "Separate yourselves from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment." Then they fell on their faces and said, "O God, the God of all spirits, of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin, and you be angry with all the congregation?" So the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the congregation, saying, get away from the tents of Korah, Datan, and Abiram." Then Moses rose and went to Datan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. And he spoke to the congregation, saying, "Depart now from the tents of these wicked men. Touch nothing of theirs, lest you be consumed in all their sins." So they got away from around the tents of Korah, Datan, and Abiram. And Datan and Abiram came out and stood at the door of their tents with their wives, their sons, and their little children. And Moses said, "By this you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, for I have not done them of my own will. If these men die naturally like all men, or if they are visited by the common fate of all men, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates a new thing, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into the pit, then you will understand that these men have rejected the Lord." Now it came to pass, as he finished speaking all these words, that the ground split apart under them, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households, and all the men with Korah, with all their goods. So they and all those with them went down alive into the pit. The earth closed over them, and they perished from among the assembly. Then all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, "Lest the earth swallow us up also." And a fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering incense. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Tell Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, to pick up the censers out of the blaze, for they are holy, and scatter the fire some distance away. The censers of these men who sinned against their own souls, let them be made into hammered plates as a covering for the altar, because they presented them before the Lord. Therefore they are holy, and they shall be a sign to the children of Israel." So Eleazar the priest took the bronze censers, which those who were burned up had presented, and they were hammered out as a covering on the altar, to be a memorial to the children of Israel, that no outsider who was not a descendant of Aaron should come near to offer incense before the Lord, that he might not become like Korah and his companions, just as the Lord had said to him through Moses. On the next day, all the congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You've killed the people of the Lord." Now it happened when the congregation had gathered against Moses and Aaron, that they turned toward the tabernacle meeting, and suddenly the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord appeared. Then Moses and Aaron came before the tabernacle meeting, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Get away from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment." And they fell on their faces. So Moses said to Aaron, "Take a censer and put fire in it from the altar. Put incense on it, and take it quickly to the congregation, and make atonement for them. For wrath has gone out from the Lord, the plague has begun." Then Aaron took it as Moses commanded, and ran into the midst of the assembly. And already the plague had begun among the people, so he put in the incense and made atonement for the people. And he stood between the dead and the living, so the plague was stopped. Now those who died in the plague were 14,700, besides those who died in the Korah incident. So Aaron returned to Moses at the door of the tabernacle of meeting, for the plague had stopped. Wow, what was Korah thinking? Man, I just don't know. It's interesting how self-delusion can take over a person to the point that you think that, well, I'm just as good and God's going to honor me. And you start thinking it's nothing more than a technicality that, well, I can swing the thing just as well as those other guys.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to prepare an animal. I know how to slaughter an animal and take the blood and put it over here, right? It's, I'm sure he could. I'm sure he could do it as well as any other priest was able to do that. Korah and those Levites were able to do that. But what they are, of course, missing is that they had not been called to that position. What?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and the whole idea of the incense. And the incense, it seems really specific. Because of course this happened with Aaron's sons, right? They offered strange fire. They were messing with the incense again, and doing it in an improper manner, or with a strange fire, or whatever technically that means. But again, there is much more to this idea with the incense, and handling the incense and coming near to the Lord with the incense than certainly than I have any a handle on. But it seems specific with the incense. And I know that you've talked about this in terms of how to approach the Lord, and what does it mean to come into his presence, because it's a fiery presence. And if it's not done properly, and properly, I don't think it's just obviously it's not just I have fire and incense. There's more to it than that. How is, so is there intent? Is there attitude? Is there a calling, a set apartness? There are other intangibles that are part of this incense ceremony that just can't be replicated by anybody stepping in and doing that. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? This is really a mystery to me.
I hear you. Well, I think what we see at the end is that he took fire from the altar and then he put it in the censers, and that stopped the plague. And this goes back to what is the origin of that fire. The origin is from God himself. Whereas the censers that Korah and his bunch brought were not, right? They seem to have brought their own fire, strange fire, right? Just as Nadav and Abihu had done, right? And so again, they're not treating God as holy. They just think that this is a kind of a cush job, like, well, why don't I get to do that, right? See, I got fire in mine, I got smoke, it's coming out, but they're missing the point is that the fire that the priests were operating under was incredibly deadly. It didn't just give you a little burn, it would disintegrate you. And then it starts to break out into the whole camp because they had brought strange fire into the basic presence of the Lord. And that seems to be what was causing them to suffer this plague. It's the same plague that we have in Numbers chapter 12, where the people were complaining, and then fire, right? Taberah, right? This is where the fire broke out.
That's just 4 chapters ago. It's like, well, I don't this is recent history. This was still in the headlines going around the camp of Israel. It's like, man, did you see what happened to Aaron's sons? What did they do? The strange fire. And it's like, what were they thinking? And again, these guys are not just schlumps. These are men of renown, the elect, so to speak. And how, obviously the saying pride comes before the fall is very applicable. I don't know if pride was their sin, that they could take on the priesthood, that it's okay for anybody to step in and do this, or what. But the fact that it's like, okay, it's Moses playing a trick. Okay, I'm going to pull a Nadab and Abihu on him. It's like, and we'll get them we'll take care of these guys with the incense trick. It's like, well, they would have known about the incense trick. Why did they think they were above it? And what's at the heart of this rebellion? That is really, I think, the core of the message here. What's at the heart of this rebellion?
I think verse 3 gives us some insight. So they gathered against Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You take too much upon yourselves, for all the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?" But even though God had called Israel to be a holy people unto himself, we've seen throughout their history, since God took them out of Egypt, that they weren't acting like it. Yeah, God wanted everyone to be holy. Certainly every head of house or firstborn was to be holy, was to be a priest. But when God came down at Sinai, the people were afraid and they said, "Moses, you go up," right? And, it didn't work out so well. And then when the, after the whole golden calf incident, right, 3,000 people were killed, and the Levites showed themselves to be faithful to God. And then God said, "Okay, I'm going to take the Levites for myself instead of every firstborn male." I don't know why they're forgetting these things, right? This isn't that long ago, right? I mean, it's within a year, somewhere in there. It's within a year that these events have happened. And they just seem to have completely forgotten that. But that's what sin does. That's what pride does, is it blinds us to the truth. It blinds us to reality, and we start having delusions of grandeur. We start believing our own press reports.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's a dangerous place to be.
But that's the thing, is that Korah is a son of Levi, right? And the other guys were sons of Reuben, I guess. I'd have to go back and read the passages. But so these 250 men, I believe they were Levites, and yet they craved the priesthood. It wasn't good enough just to function in the role that they had. It's like, oh, well, why are these guys set apart? Why are these guys called and not us?
It brings up a great point, Gary, is that, we'd like to think that, somehow Christians or the church or whatever, that we are a step above everybody else. But the truth is we're not. We have the same.
Even though we keep Shabbat and.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Don't get me started. Don't let me get you started.
Well, what's our ultimate goal, right? Is it to build our own empire? Is it to build our own fame? Yeah, that's what it's about, right? That's what we start thinking, and we forget what the real motivation is, which is to have a relationship with God and to help others come into that same relationship. That is our mission.
Yeah,
that's it. And as many times as Jesus taught about this, to die to ourselves, to take up our cross, and we're like, "Oh yes, amen," right? We like to sing about it. But the reality is harder when it really comes down to the brass tacks, as they speak, or the rubber hits the road. That's where you really see what people's mettle is, right? Am I going to do what God's called me to do? Am I going to be a disciple, or am I just going to go through the motions? Because I can trick my neighbor into thinking that I'm really an amazing person. I'm such a godly individual when I go through the motions. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? That we can put on a show for other people in our fellowship so that they will think that I'm really something, right? And that's ultimately what we're doing. And here, Korah, I mean, had he not seen all of the mishaps and trials and tough times, sleepless nights probably that Moses had all this time, and I think this is something that is often missed. I think, sometimes we look to the superstar pastors who are on, TV, and they've got 50,000 people in their church or whatever. And we're like, oh, that'd be amazing, and I'm sure the guy didn't work a day in his life. So I'm not talking about those guys, but the average pastor or spiritual leader of a congregation, whatever you want to call yourself, chances are, has been working very hard, has been putting in, lots of hours, losing some sleep, and etc. Right. And that's what Moses was going through. It was no easy job. I mean, first of all, he had to walk up that mountain a few times, right? He had to go to the top of Sinai, and that was a trek. And, I'm just joking, of course. But then, he comes down and he's brought this people out of Egypt. And what are they doing? They're whoring with this other god, right? They're not being faithful. They're already going after another god. And so many times he has interceded. He even says, erase me from your book. Don't discard this people. And so he's been interceding, putting himself in the place of as intercessor for the people. And Korah and his buddies, they really had no idea what Moses had gone through to bring the people to this place. All they could see was the glitz and the bright lights, and they wanted it for themselves. They're like, well, I could do that. No big deal, right? How hard can it be? And it's terribly unfortunate. And this leads, of course, to massive division. And Korah's family died with him. And you're like, wow, that seems awfully harsh. But you know what? That's reality. That's life. Because when a man or leader makes bad choices, the entire family is going to pay the penalty for what happened, right? It doesn't always mean they're going to die, but whatever it may be, whatever bad decision, if a pastor falls into disrepute of some sort, he falls into adultery or something, the whole family's going to pay, whether it's just reputation or money or livelihood or the home or just happiness, whatever it may be. There's always a penalty, right? So we're not an island unto ourselves, and neither was Korah. He was a leader. He brought all these guys with him, and they all suffered the same fate.
Yeah. And I think what's particularly distressing about this is it's not just an attack against Moses. It's not just questioning why did you. It cracks me up. I think it's in. I wrote it down here. In verse 13, he says, "You brought us out of a land flowing with milk and honey." It's like, okay, that's Egypt. Maybe it was a land flowing with milk and honey, but none of it was flowing down to you guys. You were slaves.
So true.
But and you didn't bring us into a land of milk and honey. Well, he did, but they decided not to go in. And so it's how they twist the words. But then there's this double attack, not just against Moses and his leadership, but against the priesthood as well. The ones who administer between God and the camp and the people, saying, "Look, we don't need any of you guys. We can handle this on our own." And the point you made earlier about that Exodus 19 tells us that the children of Israel are always designated to be a royal priesthood, right? A kingdom of priests, so to speak. But they blew it, right, with the golden calf incident, and therefore God set aside the Levites. we see that now in I think it's Second Peter and elsewhere in Revelation. It says, "You are a kingdom of priests." So there's a restoration of this, and obviously a shift of how the priesthood is to be administered, and so the sense of what the rebellion, the core of the rebellion, does it get resolved so that the fulfillment of being a kingdom of priests and the act of the golden calf gets resolved, so that those things are rectified, and we really can step into that fullness of being a kingdom of priests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really well said. Yeah, God's ultimate goal didn't change. It was paused, but it didn't change. He wanted all of us to be priests, and that is what we see restored in the new covenant, which is beautiful. I mean, there's so much in this text that we could continue looking at. I mean, there's no shortage of beautiful stuff in here. Well, maybe not so beautiful, but
right. Tragic.
Yeah, it really is tragic, And I mean, Moses, he's smart, Say, okay, we'll let God decide who is holy. And we'll cause him to come near to him. This word here, hiklev, is the same word as korban, which is kind of interesting. That the word to come near and korban, which is sacrifice, are the same. I'm not suggesting that, that they're sacrifices, but the whole point of a korban, a sacrifice, is to come near, right? And so it's the korban that provides the atonement, the covering, so people can come near. So Moses is like, look, I'm not the one who's deciding these things. God decided them, right? And he tells them, okay, you do it your way, you and your company, put fire in them and put incense in them before the Lord tomorrow, and it shall be that the man whom the Lord chooses is the Holy One. You take too much upon yourself, son of Levi, right? So they put in their own human, earthly fire instead of God's fire. And I think this is really an important thing, is that, God anoints people, right? He anoints people for various offices. Certainly he anointed Jesus, right, as the anointed one, the Mashiach. And then he anointed, the prophets of old. And I'll tell you, being a prophet was not necessarily an easy job, right? You might get your name written down and people are going to read about you forever, but I wouldn't want to be Jeremiah. I'll take the cush life, please. Thank you. I don't want to be lowered down into a well and see my entire city destroyed and taken away, and people still not believing in what God said, despite the words that God was giving to Jeremiah. That's a hard job.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's a hard job, leading God's people, speaking God's word. It's not easy.
But it's interesting that God brought the prophets only when it was necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It was like when things were going good, it's like, okay, the people are walking according to my statutes, my ordinances, my decrees, my commandments. Everything's going good. They're on track. Why do we need a prophet? There's no course correction that needs to happen. And it's when they start to stray or fall into idolatry or start to, disregard the Lord and his instructions, that it's like, okay, you need to send a prophet. And unfortunately for the prophet, it's like you're giving that message to a bunch of people that are rebellious and want to fight you tooth and nail, that don't want to change, that don't see the benefit of following after the Lord's ways, is a really difficult message to deliver. Mm-hmm. And they don't have the benefit of saying, don't shoot the messenger, an easy target.
Yeah, and again, I think people get wrapped up in the glitz of whatever position, and they're forgetting that the whole point of these various positions is to help people have a relationship with God, right? And in the New Testament, it's to be a disciple, right? That's what we'd call that. And all of these, disciple, ancient Israel, it all had one goal: to have a relationship with God. And, again, it really is that pride. It's that ego that gets in the way and says, well, I can do that. People should look to me instead of to so-and-so. And I'll tell you, dying to yourself has to be one of the hardest things in the world. At least it is for me, because I'm like, I don't want to die. It sounds lousy. Death is scary. Death is yucky. I mean, I like being alive. And of course, we're not talking physical death, right? But we're talking the death of pride. But my pride keeps telling me, you don't want to die, Doug. I like it here. You like it here. You like me. Trust me. You really like me a lot. I make you feel really good about yourself. And it's easy to believe that. But as I continue to walk with the Lord, I discover, I'm actually way happier when I die to my pride and I just let it waste away instead of feeding it. If I keep feeding it, then it'll never go away. But I have to just let it completely waste away, dry up, and then you don't care. And Moses commented that he's the meekest man in the world. And I think he was. I mean, again and again and again, he doesn't come out and say, I'm the greatest thing ever, right? He didn't say that, and yet he was challenged so many times from his own people, the people he took out. I mean, he had lots to boast about, but he didn't boast. Right. He took this people out of Egypt by God's hand, of course, but he was the guy at the front of the caravan. He was the guy up there leading the way. He was the guy who was like, okay, here we are in the desert. Put my staff up, I guess, and we'll walk through the water. I mean, that's scary to do that stuff when you got the world's largest army behind you wanting to kill you and take you back into slavery. That's scary. And it's just all ignored. And it's like, well, whatever. I don't know. It really is a sad chapter in the Bible, but it reveals so much of the human condition. It just shows us that, these things can get under people's skin. And Shemin in the comment section, she pointed out that, Korah's rebellion may have been related to this passage here in Numbers chapter 7, verse 9, where it says this different, 4 carts, 8 oxen he gave to the sons of Merari, but to the sons of Kohath he gave none, because theirs was the service of the holy things which they carried on their shoulders. So it's an interesting observation. It's hard to know, right, if this is what caused that. But, these little things can get under people's skin. And I think anytime we have yourself in mind, in view of what should be done, you're like, well, that's not right. Why did he get that and I didn't get that? Man, I struggle with that. I don't know about you, the rest of you guys, but I do. I struggle with, wait, Lord, why are you blessing him and not me? You know what you call that? That's called coveting. Mm-hmm. I hate that word. Right. And what is coveting at its heart? Coveting is idolatry. Coveting is idolatry. Because what I'm really saying, I'm breaking number 1. What I'm saying is, Lord, I don't think you are God enough to bless me. And what you've given me, I'm pretty dissatisfied with. And so what I'm doing is I'm putting up another God in place of the one true God. That is behind what Korah was doing. It was ultimately idolatry, and he was slandering Moses, and he was slandering God. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so many subtle things that are in there. When we start to unpack it, we're like, wow, that's crazy what he was really getting into.
Right. It makes me think too of finding a contentment in your own aspect of the ministry. And there should be an aspect of ministry that you're involved with. There should be something that you are called to. when when you talked about Moses and Korah, it's like Moses clearly heard the voice of God. How was he able to stand up and, with his staff at the Red Sea, how was he able to speak to the rock or strike the rock and have water come forth? How was he able to, know to go up to the mountain to receive the oracles when the others feared? Because he had this special relationship with God. It's kind of this one-on-one. And what voice was Korah listening to when he thought he should take on Moses and Aaron? Was it his own voice? Was he thinking he was hearing from the Lord? Did God speak to him and say, Korah, rise up, and Moses, I'm going to put him aside and you're going to take his place? And oftentimes, I think that's part of the pride that gets to us. And so the word, at least for me, is that there's a place in ministry for everybody, and that you should find that place and feel like a contentment in that place, a satisfaction in serving in that place. And it reminds me of the passage out of I think it's 1 Corinthians 12. I think you were just teaching in that not too recently, where we have all these body parts, right? We have hands, we have eyes, we're not all ears. We're all these things that function together, and it's part of the functioning together that really makes a wholeness of the service to God. And if we're all one type, if we're all too many chiefs and not enough Indians type of thing. Things just don't work right. And so I just urge people to hear from God and understand that there should be this place for them in ministry. It doesn't have to be some elaborate thing. Not everybody has to be, up on stage or speaking or doing this. There's a lot of things that can happen in the background, especially in a ministry today where there is, all kinds of technical aspects of making live stream work. I know you mentioned earlier, we're putting together a new website doing that, taking pictures, assembling graphics, putting together an album with the congregation, all the stuff that makes it work as a whole. Not everybody has to say, look at you, you're out of here. I'm taking your place because we're just as good as you.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Yeah, when we keep our eyes on the King, then we keep the real goal in front of us. So Chapter 17, moving along here. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and get from them a rod from each father's house, all their leaders according to their father's houses, 12 rods. Write each man's name on his rod, and you shall write Aaron's name on the rod of Levi, for there shall be one rod for the head of each father's house. Then you shall place them in the tabernacle of meeting before the testimony where I meet with you. And it shall be that the rod of the man whom I choose will blossom. Thus I will rid myself of the complaints of the children of Israel, which they make against you. So Moses spoke to the children of Israel, and each of their leaders gave him a rod apiece. For each leader according to their father's houses, 12 rods, and the rod of Aaron was among their rods. And Moses placed the rods before the Lord in the tabernacle of witness. Now it came to pass on the next day that Moses went into the tabernacle of witness, and behold, the rod of Aaron of the house of Levi had sprouted and put forth buds, had produced blossoms, and yielded ripe almonds. Then Moses brought out all the rods from before the Lord to the children of Israel, and they looked, and each man took his rod. And the Lord said to Moses, bring Aaron's rod before the testimony to be kept as a sign against the rebels, that you may put their complaints away from me, lest they die. Thus Moses did, just as the Lord had commanded him, so he did. So the children of Israel spoke to Moses, saying, surely we die, we perish, we all perish. Whoever comes near the tabernacle of the Lord must die. Shall we all utterly die? All right. So the rod that budded, right? And that made its way into the Ark of the Covenant that was there for a very long time, along with the 10 Commandments. But, God is really trying to establish that, look, I chose Moses and Aaron, right? These are the guys that I chose. They're the ones that brought you out of Egypt by my hand. It wasn't these other people. The rebellion, it's very unfortunate. I don't know. I don't, it's just unfortunate. What are your thoughts, guys?
Yeah, it was bad.
It was. I mean, it's just, it's so sad.
What strikes me is like at the end of the chapter, right? The people actually seem to get it. It's like, oh my gosh, and they're repentant. It's like, oh, but why? What was it about the rod that budded that made them repent? That fire consuming 250 men of renown, that the earth opening up and swallowing. It's like, okay, earth opens up and swallows me, or no, it swallows my neighbors and everything. I see judgment come against this, and it's like, I'm repenting, Lord. You don't have to do anything else. That's it. Or I see fire blaze across the camp, or a plague coming forward, and Aaron coming out with his incense. It's like standing between me and the plague. Aaron, come over here. Please, forgive me. I was wrong. It's like, no, we don't see any of that, but we see it with the rods. And it's like, really? It was just a dead stick brought back that makes you change your mind? I think that's a really interesting aspect of this story. Why it was a rod that budded, but not this earthquake that swallowed up whole households, or I don't know. It's like, what does it take to get your attention? Really is an interesting question sometimes.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, you had the fire and the thunder and all that with Elijah, but God's voice was not in them. But then it was in that small, still voice that God finally spoke.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah.
It's like, okay. And, it wasn't so much in Jesus' show of power that really his glory and mercy and grace were manifested, but it was in the cross, right? John in Revelation chapter 5, he sees he says, don't cry, the Lion of the tribe of Judah has overcome, right? And then he looks over and he sees a lamb as if it had been slain, right? And this is a very, very common sight, right? Today we just go to the grocery store and we pick up a pound of meat, right? But back then, this was a very close experience. This is something that they would see happen. And so everybody knew what this would look like. And that is not the show of strength at all. And yet that is what was necessary, of course, to redeem the world. So, I mean, it's a great question. Why suddenly this almond branch, that it buds, and they're like, oh, well, I guess God is real. I mean,
exactly. Oh, now I get it.
Well, but it's interesting because all the plagues and whatnot, when they came out of Egypt, those seemed to not really impress the Israelites that much. They're like, oh, okay, God brought a swarm of locusts and he brought lice, and to us there was nothing, and and then he killed the firstborn, but whoever was under the blood was just fine. And then God opened up the Red Sea and we walked on dry land, and Pharaoh didn't make it, but that's no big deal. Then he's been raining down bread from heaven and opening up rocks so that we have water to drink, but whatever, and that's really what was behind the 10 spies that brought back an evil report. And God's like, okay, that's it. I've had it. I've shown you wonder after wonder after wonder, and you guys just like, oh, whatever, like, how can you yawn at this stuff? This is not happening every day. And, you should be pretty impressed. I mean, wow, that's pretty amazing. How'd you do that, Lord?
You would think, right? Yeah,
I'm God,
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But finally they get it after this tiny little symbol. Why did they have to wait that long? I'm not entirely sure. But it is, one of those unexpected things. It wasn't the big flashy stuff that gets people's attention, and it kind of goes back to, it's kind of a cliche, but it's a pretty good one, right? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? I mean, it's totally cliche, I know. But it's a good little saying, right? Yeah. That it's not about how awesome and much you can bedazzle people, right? It's, do you really care? And I guess there was just something in this. It's a very, common device. You have a staff. People would use these for tending their sheep, right? And who's ever heard of a staff budding? I mean, that doesn't happen, right? This thing is clearly out of the ground. It's been dried. It's been polished. It's been worn. It's dead. It's dead. There's no life in it. And yet God brought life. He brought life. And maybe that was it, because the other things resulted in death of one form or another.
Yeah.
And it was God's anger. But here, God is able to bring life out of something that is dead. And that really got their attention. And that makes me think about Jesus, right? He was put in the tomb. He was dead. Yep. And then God brought life out of the tomb. He overcame death. Because, there was a god of death in the ancient world, still is a god of death. His name keeps morphing, but it's Satan, right? Just in case you were wondering, it's Satan. And he's the god of death. And he was known as the god of death. In fact, he advertised it. I'm the god of death, right? And people were worshiping as the god of death. But guess what he couldn't do? He couldn't bring life, right? Mm-hmm. He was pretty good at bringing death, but okay. That's not like a huge deal because people die. So death is not out of the ordinary, but life out of death. Now that is out of the ordinary.
That's special. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But, of course, it raises the question, then why didn't the Pharisees and the scribes and whatnot really just, why were they not blown away when Lazarus came back from the dead? It's because their hearts were hardened. They just did not want to see what was right in front of them. And this is the same thing. This is what happens in human history. God can show sign after sign. When the rich man and Lazarus, right? The rich man goes down and he says, Father Abraham, send back one of my brothers. If someone were to rise from the dead, certainly they would believe. And Abraham says, well, they've got Moses. They've got the prophets. They're not going to believe if someone rises from the dead, and that's what happened with Lazarus, of course. And I don't know, sometimes I think we can get ourselves in such a theological knot that we just don't want to see it. And I think it takes us back. And I just have Proverbs chapter 6 pulled up here. I think these things are incredibly awful because they blind us. These 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him, right? The word there is toavat, right? That's the same word as like things that God really hates, like, abortion, or, well, in the Bible, of course, it's homosexuality, right? That's the sin that we love to talk about. That's an abomination, right? And it is, right? But so are these things. They're at the same level of yuck in God's and in his nostrils. And number 1, a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among the brethren. Wow, this sounds like Korah, right? He's got a proud look, right? He's not, well, he is lying, right? He's saying things kind of subtly. I don't know if he was shedding blood necessarily, but he seemed to be maybe devising some kind of wicked plan. Feet that are swift running to evil, perhaps, but a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among the brethren. That one, certainly, he clearly had that one. And all the others seem to stem in one form or another from that basic sin. But pride is what gets us to these really ugly places.
And I think that was one of the primary problems with the scribes and Pharisees in Yeshua's day, where they valued deceit. They put pride in their position, and admitting that Yeshua raised Lazarus from the dead would take some of that pride or that value that they had, that they held closely, that was important to them, and say, but this guy, we're teachers of the law, and we're here to to guide you and bring you into the presence of God through our service in the temple. But this guy, he raised someone from the dead. Once you start to point out that, it starts to take away some of what you have. And it's like what sell everything and follow me. But no, I want to hang on to that. I want to keep what is valuable to me. I want to keep what's really important to me, because I'm selfish, because it's about me, because it makes me puffed up, because it makes me something. And once we start to shed those things and realize that, that's really not, it may be important to me, but it detracts from the message that God is trying to deliver. And then, that's where it becomes sticky.
Yeah, well said. Gary Allen asks, did Jesus sow discord? No, not at all. And just I'll put the question up there. Gary, just so you understand, Jesus certainly did cause some division, and he fully admitted that, right? And that his followers would likewise cause division. The difference is that the difference is that when you it starts off with that pride thing, right? So when Jesus came, he's God in the flesh. Like, he had the goods, and he didn't go around and say, okay, everybody worship me, I'm the greatest thing ever. He wasn't doing that. He was meek and mild. He was not coming demanding everybody, prostrate before him, but he came out as a servant. He humbled himself. And by his works and his message that people did not want to accept, there was division and some quote unquote discord, but not because he was going around like a talebearer trying to create division within the camp, right? And that's what Korah was doing. Korah knew that God had chosen Moses and Aaron. And, you can imagine the scenario. Hey, guys, why does he get all the press time? He gets to be in front of the camera. What about us, right? We're just as good. We can do this. We're doing this job. And he did not want to humble himself. And so he had 250 people with him. That means that he had to go around and talk to them. He had to go around and make his case until people believed him and they got on his side. That's causing or sowing discord among the brethren.
Right. And I see Yeshua pointed out their hypocrisy. That's not bringing discord. That's not sowing falsehoods against them. As a matter of fact, I think it's in Matthew 23, where he said, do everything that the Pharisees tell you to do. Just don't do what they are doing. That he's upholding the role of the Pharisees as they rightly bear that out. But when they don't, it's like, but by the way, these are the things they're doing wrong. Don't do that. That's a really disturbing verse for us to consider at times. It's like, really, do what the Pharisees tell us. All that they say, do. But don't do as they do. So why weren't the Pharisees doing as they instructed? That's hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well said. All right, let me get to our text. Hold on.
And likewise, Yeshua said, I did not come to bring peace, right?
Mm-hmm.
He came to expose the truth and to be the truth.
Yep. Well said, brother. All right, Numbers 18. Then the Lord said to Aaron, you and your sons in your father's house with you shall bear the iniquity related to the sanctuary, and you and your sons with you shall bear the iniquity associated with your priesthood. Also bring with you your brethren of the tribe of Levi, the tribe of your father, that they may be joined with you and serve you while you and your sons are with you before the tabernacle of witness. They shall attend to your needs and all the needs of the tabernacle, but they shall not come near the articles of the sanctuary and the altar, lest they die, they and you also. They shall be joined with you and attend to the needs of the tabernacle of meeting. For all the work of the tabernacle, but outsiders shall not come near you. And you shall attend to the duties of the sanctuary and the duties of the altar, that there may be no more wrath on the children of Israel. Behold, I myself have taken your brethren, the Levites, from among the children of Israel. They are a gift to you, given by the Lord, to do the work of the tabernacle of meeting. Therefore you and your sons with you shall attend to your priesthood for everything at the altar and behind the veil, and you shall serve. I give your priesthood to you as a gift for service, but the outsider who comes near shall be put to death. And the Lord spoke to Aaron, here I myself have also given you charge of my heave offerings and all the holy gifts of the children of Israel. I have given them as a portion to you and your sons as an ordinance forever. This shall be yours of the most holy things, reserved from the fire. Every offering of theirs, every grain offering and every sin offering, and every trespass offering which they render to me shall be most holy for you and your sons. In a most holy place you shall eat it. Every male shall eat it. It shall be holy to you. This also is yours, the heave offering of their gift, with all the wave offerings of the children of Israel. I have given them to you and your sons and daughters with you as an ordinance forever. Everyone who is clean in your house may eat it. All the best of the oil, all the best of the new wine and the grain, their first fruits, which they offer to the Lord, I have given them to you. Whatever first ripe fruit is in their land, which they bring to the Lord, shall be yours. Everyone who is clean in your house may eat it. Every devoted thing in Israel shall be yours. Everything that first opens the womb of all flesh, which they bring to the Lord, whether man or beast, shall be yours. Nevertheless, the firstborn of man you shall surely redeem, and the firstborn of unclean animals you shall redeem. And those redeemed of the devoted things you shall redeem when 1 month old, according to your valuation, for 5 shekels of silver, according to the shekel of the sanctuary, which is 20 gerahs. But the firstborn of a cow, the firstborn of a sheep, or the firstborn of a goat, you shall not redeem. They are holy. You shall sprinkle their blood on the altar and burn their fat as an offering made by fire for a sweet aroma to the Lord. And their flesh shall be yours, just as the wave, breast, and the right thigh are yours. All the heave offerings of the holy things which the children of Israel offer to the Lord, I have given to you and your sons and daughters with you as an ordinance forever. It is a covenant of salt forever before the Lord, with you and your descendants with you. Then the Lord said to Aaron, you shall have no inheritance in their land, nor shall you have any portion among them. I am your portion and your inheritance among the children of Israel. Behold, I have given the children of Levi all the tithes in Israel as an inheritance return for the work which they perform, the work of the tabernacle of meeting. Hereafter the children of Israel shall not come near the tabernacle of meeting, lest they bear sin and die. But the Levites shall perform the work of the tabernacle of meeting, and they shall bear their iniquity. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations, that among the children of Israel they shall have no inheritance. For the tithes of the children of Israel, which they offer up as a heave offering to the Lord, I have given to the Levites as an inheritance. Therefore I have said to them, among the children of Israel they shall have no inheritance. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak thus to the Levites, and say to them, when you take from the children of Israel the tithes which I have given you from them as your inheritance, then you shall offer up a heave offering of it to the Lord, 1/10 of the tithe. And your heave offering shall be reckoned to you as though it were the grain of the threshing floor, and as the fullness of the winepress. Thus you shall also offer a heave offering to the Lord from all your tithes which you receive from the children of Israel, and you shall give the Lord's heave offering from it to Aaron the priest. Of all your gifts you shall offer up every heave offering due to the Lord, from all the best of them, the consecrated part of them. Therefore you shall say to them, when you have lifted up the best of it, then the rest shall be accounted to the Levites as the produce of the threshing floor, and as the produce of the winepress. You may eat it in any place, you and your households, for it is a reward for your work in the tabernacle of meeting, and you shall bear no sin because of it, when you have lifted up the best of it, but you shall not profane the holy gifts of the children of Israel, lest you die. All right. Ooh, good stuff. Good stuff.
I'm so glad you read.
Thank you.
What's interesting here is so a lot of this rebellion came from the Levites, right? They were challenging Moses, they're challenging the priests. And yet here he just reaffirms the place of the Levites. I guess they weren't all bad eggs, but I guess the idea is that he didn't just say to the Levites, I'm tired of bearing with you. I'm going to select another tribe, or I'm just going to get rid of you guys altogether and just leave it in the hands of Aaron and Moses and their descendants. The Lord is so forgiving. The Lord understands our hearts. And I just think it's the caution that I take is being careful not to be part of the rebellion, right? Not to be part of thinking that, I'm as good as anybody else and I should be the guy at the top, or the guy at the top, he doesn't need to be there. Anybody can do this job. That's not the way it is. That is not the way it is. And if you walk faithfully in what the Lord provides to you and what the ministry He's called you to, then He will affirm that, and you'll be able to function and serve the Lord with the capacity that He's given to you.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, God is so merciful, right? And He's just confirming what He's already said. The Levites have this special relationship, right? They get a tenth, right? They don't have to go out and work the land. I mean, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing in their eyes, I don't know. But to me, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I don't have to be out in the hot sun. I don't have to do those kinds of jobs, right? So there are definitely some perks to their job. But on the other hand, it's still equitable because they're not getting an inheritance. They're not getting their own spot of land and everyone just comes and does all their bidding. That's not how it is, right? So it's the whole idea is that this is a body, right?
Yeah.
Israel is supposed to be the body. Really, that was the idea, because Israel was the wife and still is the wife, right? She is the restored wife. That hasn't changed. And it was to be a body, so they're all working together. They're all doing their part, and they're all in this relationship with God together. Yeah, the Levites have a very special part, and so do the priests, the Kohanim. Mm-hmm. They have a special part to play in this. But they could not do their job if it were not for the people out in the fields who are bringing in the produce, who are doing their work every day, right? It's all working together is how it's done.
Exactly, and this is such a common concept that Paul teaches it in 1 Corinthians 12. So to non-Jews or others that are coming into the Commonwealth, right? So, if you guys haven't seen the teachings on the Commonwealth of Israel, the seminar from last week, take a look at that. A lot of really good information in there. But as we all believers come into the understanding of what it means to be part of the Commonwealth, you'll have the same concept that we all need to work together. This is not new. This is the same way that it was established back as the tribes were brought together, as the children of Israel were trained up during their wilderness years. That would have been trained up if they had entered into the promised land. It would have been a lot easier. And I think that's the lesson that we can take too, is that if we walk in faith, right? If we trust that God will fulfill His promises to us, then we can see how all of these things, all of these aspects work together for the good. So whatever your function is, seek it, find it, and then live it. And sometimes that means you're supporting the priest. Sometimes that means you're the water bearer. Sometimes that means you tend the fire, or you cut the wood, or you're the butcher, or you mend clothes, or whatever it is. That there is something within the body, within the Commonwealth, that we are meant to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well said, brother. Well, that brings us to the end of this week's Parashat Shavua. Thank you guys for tuning in. We are always glad to see you out there. And of course, remember that we have Shabbat coming up this Saturday. It's another party that the Lord has given us. It's really wonderful time to be together. If you're able to tune in tomorrow, I have my show with John and Scott, and we will be looking at the beasts, the 4 beasts in Daniel chapter 7, and that goat that shows up in Daniel chapter 8. So that should be fun. I hope you can join us for that as well. Well, without further ado, many blessings and